And the outcome of this was not what I expected. There were two outcomes. One is that for the first time in my life, I owned who I was. And that may seem strange because I've been successful most of my adult life on several levels. You know, I'm kind of a can-do woman. You know, you think of me in a certain way. I never owned who I was. I was always giving it away. Or looking over my shoulder at who various people seemed to be talking to that couldn't possibly be me. So I turned 60, and I'm realizing there is a there, that there are certain through lines to my life, including courage, that I could own. And the other thing that I learned from this year of research was what I would regret if I didn't do something about it by the end of my life. And that would be that I had never had an intimate relationship. And what I mean by that, I'm not talking about sex, I'm talking about when two whole, actualized people come together and care for each other without leaving themselves behind. I'd never had that. Well, this was a dilemma, okay? I'd made a deal with myself that I was going to not have regrets. And I'm feeling strong. Not strong enough, however, to renegotiate the marriage. That took 2 more years. You know, and it's interesting, right? I could go to North Vietnam. I could stand up to these various investigations and stuff. But could I say to the man I loved, we need to renegotiate here, I want you to join me on a journey to intimacy? No. I was too afraid that if I did that he would leave me. And of course, I'm single. Anyway, it was as though my daughter's house had become the womb in which I was giving birth to my second adulthood. And I could feel it happening. It was a somatic experience. I could feel myself moving back into myself because I had spent 62 years disembodied, as girls and women do when they feel they're not good enough. You just move out. You don't know you've moved out, but you do feel empty and a little bit out of focus. And you notice that this person that other people seem to be looking at only kind of moves back in if you're with women friends, right? I sometimes wondered if this isn't what God is. This filling up with being. And that's when I realized that I had a book to write, and that if I was honest about my journey and its themes, that it would provide a roadmap for other people. One of the things that surprised me is the degree to which men have resonated with my themes. And basically, what is the main theme? The theme is the story of someone who grows up feeling that they're not good enough, that to be loved they have to be perfect, which is a pretty toxic thing to want to be, because nobody's perfect. You know, the goal should be to be complete, not perfect. God is perfect. We should be as good as we can be. We should always try to get better, but we're never going to be perfect. And it affects men differently, but it particularly affects women. And long about adolescence, it attaches itself to our bodies. Our thighs become our Armageddon, or our whatever it is. You know, it's like self-hatred, and that's when girls move out. They move out of themselves, and it leaves emptiness that gets filled with anxiety, and then we do various things to still the anxiety. Mine was food addiction. It can be drugs, it can be alcohol, it can be workaholism, it can be excessive exercise, it can be shopping. Shopping, if I only had that other pair of Manolo Blahniks, then everything would be all right. Or plastic surgery. I've been there, you know, if I just had bigger boobs, then it would be okay, you know. We become so vulnerable to this pressure to be different than we are. Well, this disease to please, which it doesn't just go away, it continues on into your relationships. And women tend to turn ourselves into pretzels in order to take care of, please, be what he wants, be what we think we're supposed to be, and so forth. Be good women, good wives. Now, you know, the men, it's different. I'll get to that in a second. But it took me a long time. It actually took me the marriage to Ted, which I really wanted to work. I wanted it to work. And so I was willing to gird my loins and say, I'm gonna heal. I am. I'm gonna get over my fear of intimacy. I had to work real hard. And, you know, but he liked me better before, but that's okay. So what I learned basically is that good enough is good enough. I don't mean that we should settle for little, but good enough is good enough in terms of, I'm good enough. I'm good enough. If he can't see it, whoever he or she, you know, screw it. I feel okay. It's hard to get to that place where you feel that good enough is good enough, but so before I started writing the book, I decided that I should try to understand, well, let's start with my father. I should try to understand my father. So I began to read books by Alice Miller, for example, like Breaking the Wall of Silence and The Drama of the Gifted Child, and Carol Gilligan and Terrence Real. I don't want to talk about it. A lot of books that had to do with male depression, among other things. And I ended up learning about my father and every other man in my life. All of my husbands, my brother, every man I've ever known. Carol Gilligan in particular was very important for me. She and her colleagues have done a lot of research. She's famous for the research she did on girls. What people don't know is she has 3 sons, and she's done a huge amount of research on boys. And let me, in a nutshell, sum this up. And what this talks to is this issue of girls and women being the agents of change. I've heard this for so many years. Women are the agents of change, girls, and it was kind of it sounded good. I liked it. I mean, I'd certainly like to believe it, but it was kind of rhetorical. So here's what I learned. What I've just said about girls. Girls tend to lose relationship with themselves at adolescence. They lose their voice. They choose relationship with a boy over relationship with self. Their visible public life becomes quite different than their internal personal life. There's that bifurcation. With boys, it happens at 5, 6, when they first enter public school, when they first leave home, when they first receive implicitly or explicitly these messages. Be a man, be a real man. Don't be too sensitive, don't be emotional. Don't be too close to mama. Don't cry, cry baby. You know how it goes. And little by little, and this has been well documented, they begin to shut down. They begin to become emotionally illiterate. They begin to become distant. They begin acting out in strange ways. 1 out of 10 boys in this country are on Ritalin. Not always because of this. Sometimes there's real chemical issues, but we throw Ritalin at them because we don't know what else to do. So think what this means. Little boys at 5 years old grow up feeling that they have to match up this gender norm of what it means to be a man. It happens so early in their lives that it's life. It's just, you know, it's inevitable. It's how it is. Girls have a decade before they lose their voice of owning who they are. And if we really, it's one of the great values of writing your biography. I highly recommend it, even if you never get it published, but it forces you to go back and remember. You know, it starts with, and then I did this, and then I did that, and then you have to peel another layer and said, this is how I felt. And then this is how I really felt. And very often girls will realize that they had something early on that they then lost. Not all girls, but enough to where it's, you could almost say it's universal. Sometimes it doesn't happen to girls in adolescence. Sometimes it's just that their mothers, because mothers are basically rehearsals for daughters. You know, the daughters see the mother leaving themselves behind in order to, you know, serve, care for. And so girls think that's the way it's supposed to be, and they do it. But you don't have to scratch so deep with girls and women, and they can remember the before part of it, and they can become angry. Anger is good. Anger brings clarity. They become resistors. With boys, it's so much harder. They grow up, and there's this bifurcation between head and heart. Patriarchy takes aim at girls' voices, but it takes aim at boys' hearts. And that's why I say at the end of my book, what I want to try to do with my life in this third act is to try to help us all, help girls and women reclaim their voice, and boys to reclaim their heart. I have a grandson who's about to turn 7, and I mean, I can see him shutting down. We have to work so hard to keep him emotionally literate. You know, just a whole lot of love, and you know, just the things that you can say and not say, and all kinds of things. But anyway, and that's why I think that's a kind of a conceptual, a psychological foundation for why I and many other people in this country and in the world, I've traveled the world this year, feel that if we're going to survive, if the planet is going to survive, women are going to have to lead the way. It's going to have to be women. And it's not because we're morally superior, we just don't have our manhood to prove. And there's so much at stake, isn't there? I mean, those of us, I can tell you're not all students. Some of you are in your third act. And those of us who are in our third act, I think, would agree with me. It's never been quite so bad. It's never been so scary. We've never had real radicals running this country. And I like to think of, the way I see it is that there's a crust of patriarchy surrounding the globe. But if you've ever been to Yellowstone, you've seen the mud bubbling up and the geysers and the steam coming up through the cracks and crevices and the patriarchy. That's us. That's the feminine spirit that is beginning to break through. And it's happening all over the world. I think what we have to, as individual women and girls, and as communities of sisterhood, we have to own who we are. We have to understand what's at stake. We have to understand that feminism is nothing less than the movement into whole being for men as well as women, becoming full human beings. We have to lead the way, and everyone will benefit. This is not something that we're doing over You know, we're not saying we want power over. We're not saying patriarchy has to be replaced with matriarchy. It has to be replaced with democracy. It's important for us to feel empathy, to understand that patriarchy harms men as well as women.